Arizona voters approved Proposition 206 last November, and the higher minimum wage it contained has already taken effect. But the provision promising paid sick leave for workers kicks in on July 1st. And the State Industrial Commission is working to issue guidelines for how that'll work. The ICA has revised its guidance a couple of times over the past few weeks. To help sort it all out, I'm joined by attorney Ron Stolkin with the firm Ballard, Spahr in Phoenix. He specializes in labor and employment law, primarily representing employers. And Ron, what has the commission said as far as giving some kind of guidance to employers as to how much time off to give, how that leave accrues, things like that?
As far as the amount of time and how it accrues, they haven't told us anything that the statute doesn't say on its face. They did, however, in the May 19 version, clarify a couple of really critical points for a lot of employers. Let me give you an example. A lot of employers, instead of having separate categories for vacation and sick leave, have a single block of paid time off, referred to as PTO. And employers, prior to the ICA's clarification, were very concerned that if an employee used their PTO for reasons that were unrelated to sick time, so for example, vacation, and then they got sick and they needed sick time, that employers would be required to further supplement and give additional sick time for sick leave purposes. The ICA clarified that that is not the case. If an employer has a PTO policy, an employee exhausts the PTO for even reasons unrelated to sick time, the employer is not required to give more sick leave in a year.
Do you anticipate that more employers might start to isolate vacation time versus sick time just so everybody's on the same page as to what they have and for what they can use it?
Yes, I do. Even with this clarification, a lot of employers did segregate vacation and sick in anticipation of this law, if for no other reason, for their own accounting and administrative purposes, to be sure that they knew what people had left and they could report on each paycheck what the employee had remaining in terms of available sick time or PTO.
What kinds of questions are you hearing from employers about how to implement this once it starts going into effect?
The biggest question is the one I just gave you from employers that have PTO policies. Other questions were, since this statute goes into effect in the middle of the year, what do we do for the remainder of the year? Do we have to give up to 40 hours for the year, or are we allowed to prorate it? The ICA did answer that question, and it does allow proration for the balance of, for example, an employer that selects a January 1, December 31 year, they can prorate for the balance of 2017 how much paid sick time an employee can earn.
Would that also apply to an employee who maybe starts, in February or let's say May of next year, that their sick time would also be prorated, or is that only applicable to this first half year of the law going into effect?
As far as proration for employees who work less than a full year, in other words, they're hired in the middle of the year, the ICA actually answered that question. And what they said was, in those cases, the statute makes no provision for giving an employee less because they work less than a full year, and that their accrual will be based upon the formula, if you will, contained in the statute. A minimum of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, up to a maximum of 40 hours for employers with more than 15 employees, 15 or more employees.
Have you found that your clients are generally happy with how the ICA has settled some of these questions? Are there some that are maybe leaving a little bit to be desired from their perspective?
I would say for the most part, the employers I represent are very happy with the guidance they're receiving. They have a couple of remaining questions. One of them has to do with sick leave carryover. Some employers are much more generous, and let's say an employer says every January 1, I'm going to give my employees 60 hours of paid sick time. They don't even have to earn it incrementally. And they had time remaining at the end of the previous year. Employers want to know, well, if I'm already giving more time than the statute requires, do I still have to carry over the time from the previous year, or do I satisfy that obligation by giving them more time than they would have gotten anyway? That remains unanswered, and questions may be submitted to the ICA to clarify that.
Ron Stolkin is an attorney with the Phoenix firm Ballard, Spahr. He specializes in labor and employment law. Ron, thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Mark. Thank you.